The frontier outpost was quiet that evening, quieter than usual. The metal corridors hummed with the low rhythm of recycled air, and the faint vibration of the fusion core beneath the floors carried through the walls. Daniel, a human engineer, was kneeling near the main communications panel, his hands deep inside a nest of wires and blinking lights. He had been working for hours, his shirt sleeves rolled up, his face streaked with dust. The outpost was a rare place where humans and alien allies lived and worked together, built at the edge of a star system filled with dangerous storms and drifting asteroid fields. It was both a military watch station and a place for trade. Every crew member knew that survival depended on cooperation. Still, trust did not always come easy. Daniel had grown used to the mixture of languages, appearances, and customs. Yet among all the alien officers, there was one figure who caught his attention more than he ever admitted: Lysera. She was not just another alien visitor. She was the daughter of a royal house, a warrior princess sent to represent her people. Tall and graceful, with eyes that seemed to catch the light in unusual ways, she carried herself with calm strength. Her long hair, silver with a faint shimmer, fell across her shoulders whenever she removed her helmet. Her presence always made Daniel's words stumble, though he hid it with a focus on his duties. This evening, Lysera had entered the control room quietly. She stood near the wide window where the view of deep space stretched endlessly. From her stance, Daniel could tell she was lost in thought, perhaps studying the distant stars or recalling her homeworld. Daniel did not notice at first that she was so close. He was muttering under his breath as he adjusted the wires, trying to find the faulty connection that had silenced part of the communication grid. His fingers were quick, his eyes tired, and his patience nearly gone. When the relay finally sparked to life with a green glow, relief washed over him, and without thinking, he sighed and whispered the thought that had been in his mind far too long. "She's so beautiful." The words slipped out, soft and quiet, like steam escaping from a pipe. For a second, he did not even realize what he had said aloud. He was still smiling at the lit panel, satisfied with his repair, when he heard the gentle movement of armor behind him. Daniel froze. His heart thumped hard in his chest as the realization struck. Lysera's species had sharper hearing than humans. She had been standing only a few steps away. Of course she had heard. Slowly, he turned his head. Lysera was facing him now, her expression calm but curious. Her silver eyes seemed to study him with care, as though she was weighing the meaning of his words. She did not look offended. She did not even look surprised. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her lips pressing together in a way that looked more like thought than judgment. Daniel's face burned with embarrassment. He quickly looked back at the panel, pretending to tighten a wire. His hand shook and his mouth went dry. He wanted to vanish into the floor. A human engineer confessing admiration for an alien princess? Foolish. Worse, it had not even been a confession. It had been a careless slip of his private thoughts. His mind raced through excuses he might use. Maybe he could claim he had been talking about something else. Perhaps he could laugh and dismiss it, but every idea felt weak and his throat refused to form words. The silence stretched. He could feel her eyes on him, and each passing second made the weight of the moment heavier. Finally, Lysera spoke. Her voice was soft but steady, carrying the calm tone of someone who knew her power yet chose kindness. "Humans. You speak your heart without meaning to." Daniel's eyes widened. He turned halfway toward her, unsure what to say. Lysera stepped closer, her boots clicking gently on the metal floor. She stopped only a short distance away, her tall figure casting a faint shadow over him. "Your thoughts escaped your lips," she said, her tone neither mocking nor cold. "It is rare to hear such honesty without intent." Daniel swallowed hard. His blush deepened until he thought his face must be glowing red. He forced himself to speak, though his words stumbled. It was not. What I meant was." Lysera raised a hand slightly, stopping his panic with a small gesture. Her expression softened. "Do not fear. I am not offended." Her words were simple, but they struck him harder than a shout. Relief flooded through him, mixed with a strange flutter in his chest. Still, he could not bring himself to look directly into her eyes for long. He focused instead on the floor, his fingers brushing the tools at his side just to keep them moving. Behind them, two human officers entered the control room, chatting about the storm forecast for the coming week. They paused when they noticed Lysira standing close to Daniel. Their eyes flicked from one to the other and small smirks formed on their faces before they continued walking, pretending not to notice. Daniel wanted the ground to open and swallow him whole. Lysira, however, seemed unconcerned. She turned back to the wide window, gazing once more at the starfield outside. After a moment, she spoke again, but this time her words carried a tone Daniel had never heard from her before. You humans see beauty differently than my people. Yet I wonder, is it only my appearance you speak of, or something deeper? Daniel blinked, his breath catching. He had no idea how to answer that question. His heart pounded faster, his mind blank. The hum of the outpost filled the silence, a steady rhythm that felt louder than ever. Daniel finally managed a small, nervous laugh, though it sounded shaky even to his own ears. I think I should get back to work on the panel. Lysira glanced over her shoulder at him. For a moment he thought he saw the faint curve of a smile. Then she turned back to the stars, leaving him to his work and his burning blush that refused to fade. As Daniel tightened the last bolts on the panel, his mind swirled with confusion and wonder. He had feared insult, anger, or cold dismissal. Instead, Lysira's response was calm, curious, and strangely kind. He could not decide if the moment was a disaster or the beginning of something new. When his shift ended and he walked the quiet corridors back to his quarters, her words echoed in his thoughts. Do not fear. I am not offended. For the first time since arriving at the frontier outpost, Daniel felt a spark of something unexpected. Hope. The following day on the frontier outpost began like many others. The hum of machinery filled the halls, and the crews of both human and alien teams moved about with their duties. Daniel, however, felt different. His mind was still trapped in the memory of last night, replaying the moment again and again. His whispered words, her calm response, and that slight smile he thought he had seen. He had spent the night tossing in his bunk, staring at the ceiling while the recycled air blew steadily through the vents. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined Lysira's expression, the way her silver eyes had looked straight into his, not with anger, but with curiosity. For him, that was far more frightening than rage. He could not guess what she truly thought. When morning arrived, Daniel tried to bury himself in work. He checked the energy conduits along the lower decks, tightened loose panels, and updated repair logs. His colleagues joked with him here and there, but he barely responded. Each time someone mentioned the alien delegation, his ears burned. By afternoon, he was asked to inspect the outpost shield system, which had flickered during the night storm. The shields were critical. Without them, a direct hit from drifting debris could punch holes in the station. Daniel carried his toolkit across the wide hangar bay, where several fighters were docked. His boots echoed faintly on the metal floor as he walked toward the control chamber. When the doors slid open, his heart skipped a beat. Lysira was inside. She stood near the glowing console, her long hair catching the light from the shield readouts. The faint shine of her silver armor made her appear almost like a figure carved from starlight. Two alien guards were stationed near the wall, but they kept their eyes forward, silent and still. Daniel froze in the doorway. He considered turning back, but Lysira turned her head slightly, noticing him. Engineer Daniel, she said with calm precision. You are here to check the shields? Her voice was neither distant nor overly warm. It was simply steady. Yet to Daniel, it carried weight. He nodded quickly, clutching his toolkit like a shield. Yes, I was sent to run diagnostics. She gestured toward the console. Then proceed. Daniel stepped forward, trying to act professional. His hands moved across the controls, calling up shield data while he connected his portable scanner to the terminal. Numbers and diagrams flickered across the screen. He focused on them intensely, though he could feel Lysera's presence behind him. Minutes passed in silence. He worked through the checklist, but his mind refused to settle. Finally, Lysera spoke again, her voice quieter this time. "You avoided me this morning." Daniel nearly dropped his scanner. He turned his head slightly, meeting her gaze for only a second before looking back at the screen. I was just busy with assignments," he said quickly. "A lot of systems needed checking." Lysera took a step closer. "Perhaps, but your voice betrayed nervousness when you spoke last night. Do you regret your words?" Daniel's chest tightened. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. What could he say? His heart wanted to shout that he had meant every word, but fear wrapped around his throat. After a long pause, he managed a quiet answer. "I didn't mean to say it out loud. It was careless. But I don't regret the thought itself." The words left him trembling, but also strangely lighter. Lysera studied him, her expression unreadable. Then, to his shock, her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Humans are unusual. In my culture, such words are spoken only with purpose, yet you allowed yours to slip free by accident. Still, they were true. That makes them honest." Daniel blinked at her, stunned. He had expected judgment, perhaps even dismissal. Instead, her tone carried something softer. One of the alien guards shifted slightly, but Lysera raised her hand to silence him. She stepped closer again, now standing beside Daniel at the console. Her presence filled the small space, and Daniel could feel the heat rising in his face once more. She leaned closer, her silver eyes glancing at the shield data before flicking toward him. "You blush easily," she said. Daniel's heart nearly stopped. He scrambled for words, his voice stumbling. I'm just tired. Long hours, that's all." Her faint smile deepened, though only slightly. "Perhaps." The shields hummed softly, the lights glowing brighter as Daniel completed the adjustments. Yet the air between them felt charged, alive with unspoken thoughts. For a moment, silence returned. Then Lysera surprised him again. "Among my people," she said slowly, "beauty is measured not only by appearance, but by action. Words are empty unless proven by courage. You spoke words last night without intending to. I will wait to see if they are empty, or if they carry truth." Daniel's breath caught. He turned to look at her, truly meeting her gaze this time. There was no coldness in her eyes, no mockery, only a quiet challenge wrapped in kindness. He began, but the console beeped, signaling that the shield system was fully restored. The sound cut through the moment like a blade. Lysera straightened, her face returning to calm neutrality. "The shields are stable again," she said. "Good work, engineer." Daniel nodded, his throat dry. "Yes, stable." She stepped back toward the window, her armor glinting softly under the lights. For a moment she gazed out at the drifting asteroids beyond the shield barrier. Then, without turning, she added, "Do not hide from me again. Honesty is rare in this outpost. I value it." Daniel's eyes widened. He wanted to reply, but the words stuck in his chest. Before he could gather them, she walked toward the exit, her guards following silently behind. The doors hissed shut, leaving him alone with the steady hum of the shields. He sank against the console, running a hand through his hair. His pulse raced, his mind spinning. Her response had not been rejection, it had been something far more complicated. Something that made his chest both lighter and heavier at the same time. Later that evening in the cafeteria, Daniel sat with his usual team of engineers. They were joking about minor repairs, sharing stories of home, but Daniel's thoughts were far away. He barely touched his meal. Across the hall, he saw Lysera enter with her guards. She walked with her usual grace, yet when her eyes swept the room, they paused briefly on him. Just a glance, but it was enough to make Daniel's heart leap. His teammates noticed his sudden stillness and followed his gaze. One of them raised an eyebrow, then smirked. "Careful, Daniel," the man whispered. "The princess notices you." Daniel's face burned, but he forced a small laugh. She notices everything. That's her job. Still, as Lysera passed by and sat at a distant table, Daniel could not shake the thought that her glance had carried meaning. Perhaps he was imagining it, or perhaps not. That night, as he lay awake once more, he realized something had changed. His careless whisper had not ended in disaster. Instead, it had opened a door. Lysera had not pushed him away. She had spoken of honesty, of courage, of words proven by action. Daniel stared at the ceiling of his bunk, a small smile tugging at his lips despite his nerves. For the first time, he wondered if the bond between human and alien could be more than fragile cooperation. Maybe it could become something far deeper, something neither of them had expected. And the thought, though terrifying, filled him with quiet hope. Days passed and life on the frontier outpost carried on with its usual rhythm of duty and survival. The crews busied themselves with patrol schedules, repairs, and trade meetings with passing ships. On the surface, everything seemed ordinary. Yet for Daniel, nothing felt the same. Every time he walked the corridors, his mind drifted back to Lysera's words. "I will wait to see if they are empty, or if they carry truth." Her challenge replayed in his head during every shift, every meal, every lonely moment before sleep. It was not a cruel demand. Instead, it carried curiosity, perhaps even respect, but it weighed on him all the same. One evening, Daniel joined his fellow engineers in the dining hall. The long tables were filled with humans and aliens alike, the room echoing with the clatter of trays and low conversation. Across the room, he noticed Lysera sitting with members of her delegation. Her posture was upright, her armor polished, her silver hair shining beneath the overhead lights. She seemed distant yet focused, listening carefully to her advisors. Daniel tried not to stare, but his teammates noticed. "You're distracted," said Elena, a sharp-eyed technician who had worked with him since the first rotation. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "This about the princess?" Daniel stiffened. "What? No, I'm just tired." Elena smirked knowingly. "Tired, sure. Just don't forget she's not one of us. Different culture, different rules." Her words stung because they were true. Lysera's people viewed words as sacred promises, not casual slips. Daniel had learned that from the cultural briefings when the outpost first opened. To them, an unplanned compliment might be interpreted as something far more serious. Later that night, Daniel decided to clear his thoughts by walking through the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly beyond the wide glass windows, glowing in silence. The outpost floated like a fragile island against that ocean of darkness. He was not alone. Lysera stood at the far end of the deck, her hands clasped behind her back as she stared at the stars. Daniel hesitated. His instinct told him to leave, to avoid another embarrassing encounter. But his feet carried him forward, step by step, until he stopped a respectful distance away. "Princess Lysera," he said softly. She turned her head, her silver eyes meeting his. "Engineer Daniel," she replied, her voice calm. "You walk in silence tonight." He swallowed. "I needed some air, or the closest thing we get here." A faint smile touched her lips at his attempt at humor. She gestured toward the window. "Your people look at the stars as dreamers. My people look at them as maps, lines of history and duty. Do you see the difference?" Daniel nodded slowly. "I think so. For us, the stars mean possibility. For you, they mean responsibility." Her gaze softened, and for a moment, silence lingered between them. But then her expression grew thoughtful. "Do you understand what it means to speak as you did? My people would take such words as the beginning of a vow, a bond." Daniel's chest tightened. He had feared this moment. "I didn't mean to insult your culture," he said quickly. "It was a mistake. I shouldn't have spoken without thinking." Lysera tilted her head slightly, studying him. "And yet you admitted you did not regret the thought itself." He shifted uncomfortably. "Because it was honest. I wasn't lying." Her eyes searched his face as though weighing the truth behind his words. Finally, she turned back to the stars. Then you carry both honesty and recklessness. A dangerous combination. Daniel let out a nervous laugh. That sounds about right. She did not laugh in return, but her silence was not cold. It was contemplative. Suddenly, the doors to the deck opened, and two alien officers entered. They paused when they saw Lysira standing with Daniel. Their expressions hardened, though they quickly bowed their heads in respect to their princess. One of them spoke in their native tongue, the harsh syllables sharp in the quiet deck. Daniel couldn't understand, but he recognized the tone, disapproval. Lysira raised a hand to silence them, but the tension in the air remained. The officers glanced at Daniel one last time before leaving. Daniel felt the weight of their stares long after the doors closed. They don't like me, he said quietly. Lysira remained still for a long moment before replying. They do not dislike you. They distrust what they do not understand. To them your words risk dishonor, because they cannot see into your heart as I can. Daniel frowned. And what do you see? Her answer came slowly, carefully. I see a human who speaks by accident but feels with truth. That is rare. His pulse quickened, though he tried to steady his voice. And is that a good thing? Lysira turned to face him fully now. For the first time, her expression softened more openly. It is dangerous, but yes, it can be good. Daniel could not stop the blush rising in his cheeks again. He quickly looked down at the floor, his heart racing. Before he could respond, an alarm blared through the deck. The lights shifted to red, and a voice echoed through the intercom. Warning. Meteor fragments approaching. All personnel to stations. The moment shattered as urgency took control. Lysira's expression hardened, back into the calm determination of a leader. We must go, she said firmly. Daniel nodded, his embarrassment replaced by focus. He followed her through the corridors, the sound of rushing footsteps all around them as crews moved to their posts. The outpost shook faintly as the first fragments brushed the shields. Sparks danced across the walls, and the deep rumble of engines echoed from below. Daniel ran toward the engineering bay, his toolkit bouncing against his side. Lysira and her guards moved toward the command chamber. Yet before she disappeared through the doors, she looked back once at Daniel. Their eyes met. For a brief second, no words were spoken, but the meaning was clear. Trust. In the engineering bay, Daniel and his team scrambled to reinforce the shield systems. Panels flickered, sparks flew, and the hum of energy rose as they rerouted power. Sweat dripped down his forehead, but his hands moved with steady precision. All the while, his thoughts echoed with Lysira's words. My people would take such words as the beginning of a vow. He had not meant to make a vow. And yet, deep inside, he wondered if perhaps he wanted to. The meteor storm passed after several tense hours, leaving the outpost scarred but intact. Exhausted crews slumped in their seats, relieved laughter breaking the tension. Daniel wiped grease from his hands and leaned against the wall, his heart finally slowing. But one thing remained clear in his mind. The cultural distance between him and Lysira was real, filled with rules and expectations he barely understood. Yet every time she looked at him, every time she chose to respond with curiosity instead of dismissal, that distance seemed smaller. As he walked back to his quarters that night, the stars outside the window felt different, closer, brighter. And though uncertainty weighed on him, hope still flickered in his chest. He did not know where this path would lead, but he knew one thing with certainty. The words he had spoken in accident were no longer just a slip. They were becoming a truth he could no longer deny. The meteor storm had left the outpost shaken but standing. Engineers were still patching cracks, welding panels, and running diagnostics long after the alarms went silent. The corridors smelled faintly of smoke, and the hum of the engines felt heavier than before. Daniel barely slept that night. He kept replaying the events in his mind. The frantic rush, the shield failures, and Lysira's calm gaze before they parted for duty. He had seen her take charge with commanding grace, directing her people without hesitation. She had looked like the leader she was born to be, a princess of her people, unshaken by chaos. And him? He had been an engineer, covered in grease, racing against failing systems. Yet deep down he felt proud. Proud that he had not failed when it mattered. Morning came, and with it, new trouble. A surge in the reactor core triggered alarms across the outpost. The meteor fragments had damaged more than anyone realized. The energy systems were unstable, threatening to overload. If left unchecked, the outpost could lose shields, power, or worse, life support. Daniel was called immediately. He sprinted to the engineering chamber, his toolkit already in hand. Sparks rained from overhead wires and the glow of warning lights filled the room. His team was already at work, shouting updates over the roar of machinery. "The coolant lines are blocked," Elena yelled, her hands flying across a console. "We can't keep the temperature steady." Daniel dove into the mess of pipes and wiring, his mind racing. He knew the systems better than anyone on this side of the galaxy. But the damage was worse than expected. Cracks in the coolant regulators, power lines shorting from the surge, and alarms screaming for attention. Then, the doors slid open and Lysira entered. She was not in ceremonial armor this time. Instead, she wore a lighter uniform, her long hair tied back for mobility. 2 guards trailed behind her, but she stepped forward without hesitation. "Report," she demanded, her calm voice cutting through the noise. Daniel looked up, sweat streaking his face. "The reactor's unstable. If we can't reroute the coolant, the whole system could burn out. We'd lose life support for half the station." Lysira's gaze sharpened. "What do you need?" The words startled Daniel. He expected her to stand back, to let the engineers handle it. Instead, she was offering herself. He hesitated only a second. "We need to access the secondary coolant chamber. It's in the lower levels past the damaged bulkheads. Dangerous area." "I will go with you," she said without pause. Daniel blinked. "With me?" Lysira stepped closer, her silver eyes steady. "You said honesty must be proven. Then let us prove it together." His chest tightened. He wanted to protest to keep her safe. But her expression made it clear she had already decided, and part of him realized he wanted her beside him. "All right," he said finally. "Let's go." They moved quickly, leaving the main chamber behind. The lower levels of the station were dark and filled with smoke. Emergency lights flickered, casting the corridors in shifting red. The air was thick with heat, and the sound of distant groaning metal made the place feel alive with danger. Daniel led the way, flashlight in one hand, toolkit in the other. Lysira followed closely, her steps sure and her posture alert. As they climbed over fallen beams and ducked under sparking wires, Daniel found himself speaking without thinking. "You don't have to do this. You're important. Royal." Lysira's voice was calm but firm. "Royalty means nothing if I cannot share the dangers my people face. You risk yourself for this station. Should I do less?" Daniel swallowed hard. Her words struck him deeper than he expected. She was not distant or untouchable. She was here, with him, crawling through smoke and fire like anyone else. They reached the coolant chamber doors only to find them half jammed by debris. Daniel set his tools down, bracing his shoulders against the wreckage. "Help me push." Together, they forced the door open. Heat blasted them from within, nearly knocking Daniel back. The chamber was glowing with dangerous energy, pipes hissing, steam and sparks jumping across the floor. Daniel scanned the systems quickly. "Coolant regulators broken. I'll need to reroute power manually. It's risky." Lysira stepped closer, her eyes on the sparking conduits. "Tell me what to do." Daniel blinked. "You? You could get burned." Her gaze did not waver. "So could you." Something in her voice silenced his protests. He handed her a stabilizer clamp. "Hold this in place while I work the wiring. Don't let it slip." She nodded, gripping it firmly with steady hands. Daniel crawled into the nest of wires, sparks flying dangerously close to his arms. His fingers worked quickly, pulling out damaged lines and connecting new ones. Sweat dripped into his eyes, but he forced himself to focus. The chamber shook as another tremor rocked the station. Lysera braced herself against the wall but did not let the clamp move. Her voice carried over the roar of the reactor. "Why do you risk yourself so easily, Daniel?" He gritted his teeth, tightening the last wire. "Because it's my job. Because if I don't, people could die. Because..." He hesitated, his voice dropping lower. "Because I don't want to see you hurt either." For a moment, silence followed, broken only by the hiss of steam. Then Lysera spoke softly. "Your honesty shows again." Daniel's heart raced, but he forced himself back to the task. The final connection snapped into place, and the coolant system roared back to life. Cold air rushed through the chamber. As the temperature dropped, the warning lights dimming one by one. "It's working!" he shouted, relief flooding his chest. Lysera released the clamp and stepped back, her expression calm, but her eyes brighter than before. "You have done well, engineer." Daniel laughed breathlessly, sinking against the wall. "We did it, together." For a long moment, they stood in the quiet chamber, the danger fading but the tension between them stronger than ever. Daniel's shirt was soaked with sweat. His hands burned from sparks, but all he could think about was her calm presence beside him. Lysera finally spoke. "You said you did not regret your words. Now you have proven them with action." Daniel met her gaze, his chest tightening. "And you didn't have to help. But you did. That means something too." Her lips curved faintly, not quite a smile, but close. "Perhaps it does." They left the chamber together, walking side by side through the smoke-filled corridors. The alarms had gone silent, replaced by the steady hum of a stable reactor. When they returned to the main engineering bay, crews cheered as systems came back online. Elena clapped Daniel on the shoulder. "You did it!" she exclaimed. But then she noticed Lysera beside him, her hair damp from the heat. Her eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing more. Daniel only nodded, still catching his breath. His eyes, however, lingered on Lysera. She had stood with him in the fire, not as a distant royal but as an equal. That night, as the outpost settled back into calm, Daniel lay awake in his bunk once more. But this time his thoughts were not filled with embarrassment. They were filled with something warmer, stronger. Her words echoed in his mind. "I will wait to see if they are empty, or if they carry truth." Now, he felt, she had seen his truth. And he wondered what her answer would be when the time finally came. The outpost finally returned to calm after the crisis. The repairs were finished, the reactor stabilized, and the shields restored. The crew worked with a quiet pride, relieved that disaster had been avoided. Yet beneath the ordinary rhythm, something had changed. The story of what had happened in the lower coolant chamber spread quickly. Engineers whispered about how Daniel had crawled into live wiring to save the station, and how Princess Lysera herself had stood by his side. To many it was a tale of courage and unlikely cooperation. To Daniel it was something deeper. He could not forget the way she had looked at him as he worked, the steadiness of her hands, the calm strength in her voice, and the words she had spoken when the danger passed. "You have proven them with action." That night Daniel barely slept. He replayed every moment until dawn painted faint light through the station windows. His heart was restless, torn between pride and fear. What had he truly proven? What would Lysera do with that truth? The answer came sooner than he expected. A gathering of crews, the next evening, both human officers and the alien delegation gathered in the central hall. It was rare for the two groups to meet in full, but the commander of the outpost insisted on recognizing the efforts of all who had kept the station alive. Daniel stood near the back, his uniform smudged with oil from another day of work. He tried to stay unnoticed, blending with the other engineers. But his eyes kept drifting toward the front, where Lysera stood tall in her ceremonial armor, her silver hair tied elegantly behind her shoulders. She looked every bit the leader her people expected, A princess, a warrior, and a symbol of her culture's pride. The outpost commander, a gray-haired human officer, stepped forward. He gave a formal speech about cooperation, resilience, and survival at the frontier. The crew clapped politely, but Daniel's attention barely registered the words. His gaze kept shifting to Lysera, whose calm expression revealed nothing. Then the commander gestured toward her. "We are honored," he said, "to have Princess Lysera among us. She and her delegation have been steadfast allies, and her actions during the crisis deserve recognition." The room fell silent as Lysera stepped forward. Her boots echoed across the metal floor, and her tall figure commanded the hall without effort. She stood at the center, her eyes sweeping across both crews. Her voice rang clear, strong, but steady. When the storm struck, and when the reactor threatened to fail, courage was required. Courage did not come only from rank or title, but from action. And in those hours, I witnessed a human show both skill and truth. Daniel's stomach dropped. He realized with sudden panic that she was speaking of him. The answer. Before all Lysera's gaze moved slowly across the hall, then stopped. On Daniel. Her silver eyes locked on him, and for a moment, the world narrowed. He felt every head in the room turn his way, felt heat rise in his face, and wished he could sink into the floor. But Lysera did not waver. She raised her voice so all could hear. Engineer Daniel spoke words that might have been careless in your culture but sacred in mine. He called me beautiful, not to flatter, but because the truth of his heart escaped unguarded. Gasps rippled through the hall. Some humans glanced at one another in shock. Several aliens frowned, whispering in their native tongue. Daniel's pulse thundered in his ears. Lysera continued, her tone unwavering. Among my people, such words are weighed carefully. They are not given lightly. Yet Daniel did not hide behind excuses. He stood in fire, in smoke, in the roar of failing systems, and he proved his honesty with action. He risked himself not only for this station, but for all within it. For that, I honor him. Daniel's chest tightened, his throat dry. He could hardly breathe. Then Lysera said the words that would stay with him forever. Humans are bold. This human spoke his heart by accident, yet lived it by choice. I do not take offense. I find his honesty beautiful. The hall's reaction. The hall erupted into murmurs. Humans exchanged surprised glances, some smiling, others whispering. The aliens looked more cautious, their strict traditions unsettled by such an open statement. But no one dared challenge the princess's words. Daniel felt his face burn hotter than ever. His hands trembled at his sides. He wanted to look away, to hide, but Lysera's gaze held him in place. For a heartbeat, he forgot everyone else in the hall. It was just her calm eyes and the quiet curve of her lips that was not quite a smile but close. The commander cleared his throat, clearly unsure how to continue. Well, let us commend all who stood firm in the crisis, he said awkwardly. Together we survived. The hall applauded politely, though Daniel heard the difference in the claps, some firm, some hesitant, some distracted. He barely noticed. His world was spinning from Lysera's words. After the gathering, when the meeting ended, crews filtered out, buzzing with quiet conversations. Daniel tried to slip away, hoping to avoid more attention. But as he reached the corridor, a voice called after him. Engineer. He stopped. Slowly he turned. Lysera was there, her guards a few steps behind her. She walked toward him with measured steps, her armor catching the dim corridor light. When she reached him, she stopped close enough that he could see the faint shimmer in her eyes. You are unsettled, she said softly. Daniel laughed nervously. Everyone was staring. And you spoke about me in front of the whole hall. Lysera tilted her head slightly. Did you not wish for my answer? He swallowed hard. I didn't know if you would ever give one. Her expression softened just enough for him to see the truth beneath her calm exterior. I gave it tonight. I do not mock your words. I accept them. Daniel's heart leapt. You accept them? Yes, she said simply. And I give my own in return. Among my people, when words are spoken honestly, they are met with truth. My truth is this: your courage moves me. And though our cultures are far apart, I do not see you as less. I see you as equal. Daniel stood frozen, his chest tight, his mind struggling to believe what he was hearing. His face flushed deeply, but this time he did not look away. Lysera, he began, then stopped, unsure what to say. She studied him a moment longer, then added quietly, "Do not blush in shame. Blush in pride. Honesty is rare. Hold it carefully." Her words left him speechless. A new beginning. The days that followed carried whispers across the station. Some spoke of scandal, others of unity, but none could deny that something had changed. The princess of an alien people had given respect to a human engineer, not through politics or duty, but through words of the heart. Daniel returned to his duties, but he no longer walked the halls with his head down. When he passed Lysera in the corridors, their eyes would meet, and though nothing more needed to be said, the silent understanding between them was clear. In quiet moments, when Daniel looked out at the stars, he thought of how close he had come to keeping his feelings locked inside forever. One accidental whisper had changed everything. He had spoken without meaning to. He had blushed in shame. But in the end, his words had been received with grace and answered with truth. For the first time since arriving on the outpost, Daniel no longer felt like a small engineer in a vast galaxy. He felt seen, and somewhere in the silence of the stars, hope burned brighter than fear.